And our Hangout is live, October 29th, 2014. We're having a special Hangout slash webinar with Professor Stephen McCool on the 4 keys to enhancing protected area manager performance. Good morning, Steve, on the final days of October 2014.
Yeah, and good morning, Ron. It's good to be here again. Some of you out there, good morning, at least from my house here in northern Montana, western Montana, northern part of the United States. And it's a nice kind of gray, rainy morning up here, and maybe good afternoon to you or good evening wherever you happen to be.
Excellent. We're talking about park management today. Can you give us a little bit of a rundown of what you'd like to be just talking about today?
Yeah, what we're going to be discussing is my some views.
Phone.
Yeah, it's my phone that for some reason never rings and now has decided to ring. Sorry about that. I'm in my home, so there's lots of activity here. So what we're going to talk about today is some thoughts I've developed over the last period of time dealing with enhancing the performance of protected area managers, which is a more inclusive way of thinking about capacity development than just simply capacity development.
All right, very good. Just a reminder to viewers, if you're watching it live, questions can be answered during our Hangout. Just please post them on the event page or on the Q&A app, and we will get to them.
Yeah.
So, and thank you for watching.
Yes.
If you're watching afterwards, sorry we can't answer in real time, but feel free to post a question, and we'll see if we can get to it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll be posting this up on YouTube and some links to the webinar. So, Ron, why don't I just go ahead and get started?
Please.
Is that okay?
Please.
And folks, this will I'm going to speak for a while, and Ron, if you have a question you want to ask me, then go ahead. Okay, so the title of this presentation is 4 Keys to Enhancing Protected Area Manager Performance. And let me just give you a little bit of background. Of course, as a university professor for I don't know, 44 years or so now, my fundamental job is developing and disseminating knowledge, and that by its very character is capacity development. And but as I kind of move from teaching formal classes at the baccalaureate level to working more directly with protected area managers, I began to see that there is much more to increasing the effectiveness of management than simply building capacity. Way back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, I had taught a series of courses on limits of acceptable change as a visitor use management strategy. And what clearly came from that, in my perception, is that while many people engaged in those short courses, many managers did, most of them probably never really went out and practiced limits of acceptable change. And I began thinking a little bit at that time about, well, you know, what's wrong? What's going on here? And over the last 10 years or so, when because I've really emphasized manager level capacity development, I started thinking much more about this. And so what I have to say here is built upon some interactions I've had with my colleagues here at the University of Montana, some colleagues at universities in Southern Africa, where we've tackled this issue of capacity development, as well as a colleague with the Royal Society for the Conservation of Nature in Jordan. So very much what I have to say is a function of those conversations. Okay, and this is a particularly important issue because one of the uh, major concerns we have in protected area management globally is trying to make management effective. And a number of studies have looked at management effectiveness in the last 5 to 6 years, and basically have come to the conclusion that uh, only maybe a third of the world's protected areas, a third out of 200,000 that are formally declared now, only a third of those are being effectively managed. And as a result of some of that, some of those findings and the character of the world as we experience it today, we've become to feel that capacity building is the fundamental building block to effective management. That is, by giving managers, planners, and protected area agencies and NGOs the skills to work in the protected areas, then their performance in actually protecting them will be enhanced. So it's been seen as this fundamental building block, and it's built upon a model that kind of starts this way: that we infuse an individual protected area manager with things that we call knowledge. That of course has been largely the role of university professors, but also people in agencies and NGOs that their job is building capacity. And as a result of infusing people with that knowledge, they automatically are now competent in application of that knowledge because of the fact that they have it now. They know how to do things. And then because they're competent in this, their performance in actually protecting the natural heritage values that are present are enhanced. And so this is kind of the very simplistic model upon which a lot of capacity building efforts have been constructed. And in my experience, it's not working very well, this particular model. And so I started asking again questions about why it's not working particularly well. And it turns out, of course, that capacity is only the potential for someone to do well, to enhance their performance. And I learned this from an individual by the name of Jonathan Cook, who wrote a very interesting paper about sustainable development about almost 20 years ago now, and where he was saying, sustainable development is basically about people, and we can give them these skills, but that's the only those skills is only a potential, and that is one of the keys that we will see shortly to enhancing people's performance. And basically, people will perform well only under certain conditions, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So if capacity is only potential and it's not really enhanced performance, then how can we increase their performance? And so in, again, thinking about this and in discussing this issue with colleagues, come up to this idea that there are 4 keys to unlocking manager performance. And that's what we want to do. We want enhanced performance of managers. We want them to effectively take care of and provide good stewardship to the areas that are under their direction and authority. And we need to think about these 4 keys. Okay, so are we all together on this now, Ron?
I'm hearing you.
Yeah. Okay, so these are the keys that I see are really needed. The first key is developing critical thinking abilities within managers. And the reason for this is that we live in a world that is changing very rapidly at times, with all different forces of change, which could be another webinar to talk about those things, but things such as climate change, things such as changing governance, things such as changes in technology and changing public values. And in that world, because of the change, there's quite a bit of uncertainty and there's quite a bit of complexity. And the first thing we need from managers is an ability to think critically about what's happening in their protected areas and the forces that are affecting that, the processes that are going on within that, and to be able to reflect upon those processes, make an evaluation, have good situational awareness skills, thinking skills, be able to make sense out of things that are happening, and so on. And that is normally the domain of higher education or tertiary education for those of you who live in places where that's what it's called. That's the domain generally of universities and colleges, is not just imbuing students with facts, but to get them, to help them, to assist them in their critical thinking skills. You know, it's not just a hypodermic needle kind of situation where we inject knowledge into a person and they automatically do better. We have to really help them develop these particular skills. And that traditionally, and I'd argue still today, is the major domain of higher education. Okay? A second one of these competencies is the competencies that we normally think about when we talk about capacity development, is competency in the development of conceptual and physical skills. We need people who know how to do things, whether it's using a double buck saw to clear out a trail in an American wilderness, whether it is tracking animals with radio collars on them, whether it's using a GPS or developing a GIS system or developing an interpretive program. We need people who know how to do things, either those things being either conceptual or in a physical way. And this has been the focus, this training has been the focus of a lot of attention in capacity development. And again, I differentiate between training, which is the acquisition, the transfer, if you will, of skill from one person to another, and the critical thinking, which is more in the way of education. The critical thinking deals more with the why we are doing something, and the training deals more with how we can do something. So I hope you understand that. Did you get that message, Ron?
I sort of do. I'm stuck on the idea of the difference between the critical thinking and the training and the actual practice. Because it sounds to me as if people are being educated and being trained, but they're not putting this into effort.
Okay, well, we'll get to that in just a moment. Okay, so
but I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. So this is the second key: competency in conceptual and physical skills. And you know, we have a trend to have competency-based training, and the problem with that is that it often does not include important critical thinking activities and development and leadership and things like that, but deals more with how you do things. Okay, so the third aspect of this is developing confidence in making decisions. Okay, so if we have people that are educated, they can think critically. They may have, for example, because this is a tourism and protected area specialist group talk, they may have an ability to think about the kind of visitor experience they're trying to pursue or trying to offer in a protected area. So they might have that kind of critical thinking with them in terms of sorting out this. And then they may have the physical skills or the conceptual skills to design, say, a system of management within their park or protected area to offer those, but they may not have the confidence in making decisions. By confidence, I mean some kind of assuredness that I, as the protected area manager, am making the right decision. And developing confidence is not something we normally think about in capacity development programs. We usually think, as I said, mainly about the physical and conceptual skills. Sometimes we'll think about critical thinking ability, but confidence is very important in making decisions. And yesterday I was talking with some colleagues, for example, about a major issue on public lands in the United States, lands that are primarily undeveloped and um, unroaded, and is the management of fire. And there's been a great change in attitudes and in the science of fire in western landscapes of the United States. And basically, we now recognize that fire, natural fire, has helped shape these landscapes, and we have to restore those. But many managers are risk averse. And if they have a fire, say a lightning caused fire, start, they may want to put it out when indeed the right decision would be to let it burn. And part of the reason for this is that they don't have the confidence in making decisions because their supervisor above may view this in a negative way for one reason. So where do we get the confidence in making these decisions? Well, part of it, of course, is by experience, but a large part of it can be developed through using a community of practice. And a community of practice is a voluntary association of people with similar interests, shared values, that are confronted with similar kinds of problems, and that they work together in an informal way in sharing their experiences and thinking about how they would respond in a particular situation. So we can develop the confidence in making these decisions by, for example, a community of practice rewarding people, decision makers, formally or informally, when they do make the decisions that lead to more effective protected area management. Okay, so that's the third key to this.
Steve, can I just
Yeah.
pause on a second?
Yeah.
Well, I love this idea. The question that I have is, to what degree are the community of practices long-lived? And the fact that there are always a variety of opinions about some of these issues. So,
Right.
you're certainly going to have a number of people and learned people being able to say, yes, the fire management needs to proceed down this avenue. But you're no doubt going to find other people arguing a different way, if not in this specific example, in others. How do you engage people in a way of bringing people in and developing this community of practice over the long term that really allows people to develop the sound practices of park management?
Mm-hmm. I think this is an excellent question because this is of the three keys I have identified so far. This is probably the weakest one. Managers, I'm just thinking now of a manager, say, in a place called the Steens Mountains Wilderness, which is in eastern Oregon in the U.S., an outstanding protected area of maybe 100,000 or so hectares in size. This person is all alone. Okay, certainly there's the formal bureaucracy, but that's more or less a hierarchy of, giving and taking orders. So that person is probably going to be risk averse simply because they don't want to get the wrist slap for making a wrong decision. And so we have to develop the mechanisms to get to join people together in a community of practice. And so, networking, like at a conference, is very important in developing this kind of community of practice. But it's going to take someone with some time to get people together to be able to have discussions about the decisions that they have to make and the criteria they use to make decisions one way or another, the consequences of that, to spread this experiential knowledge the managers have around. A community of practice is not really I don't think it can be really established as a formal organization. It's people who kind of bond together because they have similar work values and priorities, and who see that they need to get input from other protected area managers. So, Ron, you've asked a good question. Many of us don't have much time and to organize a community of practice, but right now, at least the technology is there, such as what we're experiencing right now, to enhance the development of a community of practice. And that's one reason, incidentally, behind the Tourism and Protected Areas Specialist Group in WCPA is for it to become a community of practice. And we will enhance that, of course, at the World Parks Congress coming up in a couple of weeks. Does that help, Ron?
It certainly does, and it is a topic that we're not going to answer all the questions about in 10 minutes. So
right.
Well,
Well,
we'll come back. Yeah, I understand. We'll come back to this, and I really would like to come back and touch upon this perhaps on a later hangout as well,
right.
because as I see it, there are people who just love to go to meetings, and that they will keep a network going for their own personal reasons while everyone keeps on dropping out. I've seen far too many examples where the community of practice starts with a very noble cause and some really good work, and then it just disintegrates. And the question is building really productive and effective groups in which you have some people who are able to get together and make some meaningful changes that transform everyone.
Right. Yeah. The you certainly have to have a champion. You have to have people with the time, the motivation. They must see value in making contributions and sticking with it. And incidentally, I'm going over each of these 4 keys very briefly, as it's pretty much at an abstract level because this is more of an introduction than anything else. So, we should come back to these.
Please go ahead, and
Yeah.
this is great. By the way, we have 5 viewers, and Yufei is among them. Hey, Yufei. Reminding people, if you have questions, please ask them, and we will get to them during this Hangout webinar.
Yeah. Okay, so the last key is working within an enabling environment. And basically, this enabling environment is our organization that employs us. That organization, for us to really have our work well, have enhanced performance, we have to be empowered and to do that. And what I mean here is that we have an organization that tolerates error or mistakes, focuses on learning from those, an organization that establishes truly a culture of learning, an organization that provides the time and the leadership to encourage its employees to enhance their skills, their critical thinking, even to work within a community of practice. And organizations often are the death of any capacity development program, if indeed they don't provide incentives for people to do well, who've made decisions that lead to protection of the natural heritage values that are within that. An organization that empowers its employees to do things, to do the right thing, empowers them to have the power over other people, the power to work collaboratively inside and outside the agency. Oftentimes the people that we work with may not even be within the same division, the same region, may not even be within the same agency, but are the source of good ideas and resources and so on. So we have to empower managers to work with them, and we have to empower managers within. That is, to give them the time and the developmental resources needed to enhance their values and their beliefs about protected areas and and a work ethic and so on. So we need an organization that creates this enabling environment so people will do well. And we have examples in the corporate structure of organizations. I think Microsoft might be one of those. Google might be another, where there's tremendous creative energy that is unleashed when people work within an environment, a context that is encouraging and provides incentives. At the same time, I know that in working with some managers on in capacity development, the traditional skills and things like that, they go back to their job and their supervisor feels threatened because these new employees have skills that the supervisor doesn't have. The supervisor is worried that those new employees, or the employees that came back from the training, will now be moved upward, promoted within the organization over the supervisor. And so that means we have to have a culture within the organization that is much more supportive of learning and doing something and recognizing enhanced performance. So those are the 4 keys, and just a couple of slides to conclude with this. What this requires, if we really want enhanced performance, it requires we take an integrated approach. That is, we need an organization needs to think through these 4 keys: the critical thinking, the how-to skill development, the community of practice, and then it has to look inside itself and ask itself, are we creating a culture of learning? So all that in a staff development program has to be taken into account. We particularly need to have coordination between training and education providers. If you are interested and staff are interested in a search and rescue training, you wouldn't go to my classes that I used to teach in recreation and tourism planning. You would go to some kind of training institute to provide that. The education provider might be helpful in thinking critically about the kind of search and rescue system, where it might be appropriate, where it might not be appropriate, other issues that come up. So that means we need to have coordination between training and education, a systematic kind of program. And we have to have organizational leadership. That is, the decision makers, the leaders of the organization, have to work hard to create a context that is conducive to people learning and application of that learning, to thinking critically, to asking questions that may not be the most appropriate, a leader might think, but being able to tolerate those, even encourage them so they can move forward. And then we need to work across boundaries. And here is what I mean is that we have academics, we have training institutes, we might have community of practice that includes people from other organizations, and we might have some other types of people. And we must be able to work across these organizational boundaries in addition to the normal kind of geographical or political boundaries that we work with. So enhanced performance, to basically conclude, means several things. One is that we will have more effective protection of natural heritage. We'll move that figure of 1/3 of the protected areas being managed effectively upward to maybe in 10 years it's 50%, or maybe it's even higher than that. So it means that. It means from a tourism area we will have better visitor experiences. And these are important because it's through visitor experiences that we develop the political motivation and the political support for protection of natural heritage. And then it also means that we'll probably have much more viable communities that have a strong linkage with a protected area. So that's what we're ultimately, I think, trying to achieve in this enhanced performance. So I want to thank you for listening right now. Hopefully this is hasn't been too long of a briefing on these 4 keys. If you're interested in looking at reading some sometimes provocative essays on protected area management and planning, you're welcome to visit my blog here at Pasque Flower. Pasque Flower, which is in the lower right of your screen, is the second flower to come out in the spring in western Montana. To me, it means an emergence of new ideas and new paradigms of management. So, Ron, I will turn it back to you for right now. And if we have any questions, we're certainly willing to take them.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you very much. What a solid foundation for looking at how to make protected areas more effective in their management. All right, so quick question, citation please. How do you get the 1/3 of protected areas being effectively managed?
Yeah, that's a result of a series of studies, a group of people led by a person's last name, scientists by the name of Leatherington, that have studied this. They have queried a lot of different countries, and they're asked, a bunch of questions about their protected area management and how well it's going, and kind of have accumulated this. So it's, and probably even 1/3 is probably very optimistic. So we have, this is, if we go back a ways, we've all heard the term, paper parks, and this is, where we've identified a protected area, we've drawn a line around it, and we never do anything with it. And so this is getting at that idea that, boy, we went through all this work, which is usually political, in the political setting, to draw the lines, designate a protected area, gazette it, and then we never manage it, and with potential loss of the natural heritage values contained within it. So we need more effective management. That's what the purpose of their particular studies.
Well, of course. The 1/3, is that part of was that part of an academic study that's citable?
Yes, right. I don't have the citation with me right now, but yeah, that's cited. Actually, I published an article a couple of years ago in Parks, the IUCN publication Parks, on looking at the HE targets for the Convention on Biological Diversity, and I cited in that particular manuscript as well, is that we've got a big job ahead of us in terms of getting more effective management, and this enhanced performance is what we're looking for. That's one of a set probably of larger keys. Another big area is kind of at the institutional level. Do the institutions have the legal authority to deal with protection? And another one, of course, is in the budgetary area, giving the resources to protected area managers to do the protection that's needed. But really, unless we have people on the ground, the boots on the ground, doing the right things, those others aren't going to have the kind of impact that they could have.
No, I hear you, and I guess my question is, it goes into the development of what the IUCN is calling the green list. Do we know the parks that are being managed effectively?
Yeah, and they're developing this green list again based on, I think, a series of questions that they are mailing to, say, national or individual park managers. I'm really not too much aware of the exact procedure for doing that. But one of the questions might be the qualifications of the managers. So, in the presence of a staff development program, so on.
It'd be interesting to, just figure out how we're evaluating parks now and into the future. If you want to make an improvement, 50% being effectively managed, then again, how do we measure that, and how do we, keep track of it?
Mm-hmm.
It's, I as you know, I'm a big fan of the social web, and it's easy to see, the top 10 attractions according to TripAdvisor. It's easy to see the top, the top selling books from Amazon or from the New York Times,
Uh-huh.
for that matter. And again, what parks are doing it really well,
Yeah.
and when there are obstacles, and right now I'm looking at you, Australia, um, the contentiousness that is permeating
Yeah.
the parks and wilderness areas in Australia. The report just came out this week that the Australian Academy of Sciences was thoroughly dismissive of the Australian government's program to protect the Great Barrier Reef,
Right. Yeah.
just saying, too little, too late, and this is where you're not doing things.
Mm-hmm.
To me, this is the question going
Yeah.
back to that community building. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there are two disparate groups here in many of these parks. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the group right now that wants to privatize and develop more industry within the parks, and the people that want to protect the conservation and biodiversity aspects of
Yeah.
the parks. How do we bring these people together? And is there a way of creating that
Yeah.
community?
Well, I'm not sure in the case where there's um, like dredging and that kind of thing and mining that it's going to be possible to bring preservationists and managers and miners together, because if you have a mine, particularly an open pit mine, you don't have a park in the place, that's gone. Um, but there are places. I'm working with a park in Eastern Europe, and I won't go into the name right now, uh, which has uh, a high level of visitor use, and the visitor use is so high that while the park itself, the characteristics, receive lots of favorable comments from people on TripAdvisor, the management of the youth is receiving lots of negative comments. So the park managers want to do something to change the situation. But on the other hand, the Ministry of Tourism sees visitation as important to bringing in foreign exchange. And here, I think there's an opportunity for people to work together um, to come to some kind of way that we can manage visitors much more sensitively and carefully, and at the same time retain the economic contribution. Uh, uh, for example, we can provide alternative ways for people to have longer lengths of stay. In this particular park, the average length of stay for a visitor in there in the park is about one night. Um, but but there are a lot of other things to see and do around the park that we might be able to extend that length of stay to 2 nights, or maybe the average would go up to 1.5, and consequently you have an increase in spending. But it all has to be done in a careful probably at a regional scale, and with managers who are well trained and sensitive and confident about how to work with the community and with the tourism people to help them see that high visitor use is having a negative impact on the quality of experience visitors are having. And if we get a park with a bad reputation for visitor experience quality, that's the death of their tourism industry.
Well, I hear you. And the question going back to, how do we, how do we evaluate that? It's not going to appear on TripAdvisor,
Yeah,
but are
right.
there any other publicly transparent mechanisms to find out the park visitation numbers and the impacts?
Yeah.
Nothing seems to be public.
Yeah. Well, we can make it public, and we can do things such as doing really good studies of visitors and finding out the kind of what motivates them to come to a park. And I'm not talking about just are you satisfied? That's a very superficial measure. But what are your expectations for your visit to this park? What do you want to see? What do you want to experience? And then how close are we getting? Are we being the managers? Are we getting to providing that? And then, of course, are your expectations even appropriate for uh, for this particular park? And that's something we have to really research very carefully. For example, if we go to a French restaurant we would expect to have French cuisine served. If we go to a French restaurant with the expectation that we're going to have German cuisine, we're probably going to be disappointed. But our expectations are not really adequate, appropriate.
They're not realistic.
And yeah, not realistic. And often I think we're in that setting in protected area management. This is where corporations such as Disney really excel. And I'm not saying we turn a park into a Disneyland, but I am saying that they have figured out their market very well, and they keep track of what's happening daily, if not hourly, in their particular park to make sure that people are happy and that the park is meeting their particular expectations. I was at an eco lodge in May in the Brazilian Amazon, and had a nice discussion with the owner of that lodge, in which he tracks comments, not only on the little comment card in the hotel room, the lodge room, but also on TripAdvisor. He tracks those comments every day, so he has immediate feedback as to whether or not he is providing the kind of experience that his clients want. And now, not every park can afford that, but every park can start thinking more about what's happening to its visitors.
I hear you, and I think you're onto something there that needs to be articulated better for park managers. The question is, what are the feedback mechanisms to listening to the public and listening to visitors, listening to locals, and to make sure that those avenues are open.
Right, and that's where that's where the critical thinking comes in. So, okay, asking questions such as, well, who are we managing this park for? We really don't manage it for everybody. We manage it for people who have interests and motivations compatible with the park's purpose. So who are we managing the park for? What kinds of facilities, infrastructure, interpretive programs, and management do they need? So that's all the critical thinking. The training gets into, well, now how do we provide that, say, in interpretation programs, or as well, we might want to develop a particular questionnaire or visitor study that would help provide the feedback. And then working with our community of practice, we get some really good ideas on how to do that. And then we have to have an institutional environment that's really encouraging to find out, oh, you know what, we screwed up. We're not doing so well. We need to improve our practice. And that's tough for a lot of organizations to have that attitude.
Well, that's underselling the point.
Yeah.
Hey, we have a question and a comment from Yufei. And
Okay.
Steve, help me out first of all. How do we pronounce Yufei's last name?
Lung.
Okay.
As far as I know, sorry, Yufei, if I mispronounced that. So we're just going to call him Yufei.
Okay, we're going to get you into our hangout soon, Yufei. And Steve, in your opinion, which key is in the greatest deficiency? Any difference between developing countries versus developed countries?
Okay.
Thank you.
That's a tough question to address, Yufei, but thank you for asking it. I'd say generally, in terms of the whole idea of capacity development, the community of practice idea is not implemented very well. And Ron, you've identified some reasons for that. Excuse me. Pardon me. I'm still kind of recovering from a brief cold. So I think the community of practice idea. Oh, excuse me. I hope this doesn't sound too bad.
We'll edit it out.
Yeah. Let me take a drink of water here.
Please, please.
Integration of higher education with training, and then I mean, all of them are not very well articulated or implemented, I guess. And then the organization. I think in um, developing countries, probably the strongest element of this of these four keys is actually the training component. You know, building the competency of physical and conceptual skills. And I think that's the because we tend to see that's the obvious deficiency. People out there on the ground don't have the skill to do things. It amazes me actually that when we talk about capacity development, that we never bring in university professors, or very rarely, to talk about critical thinking skills, because that's often not part or not perceived to be part of capacity development. The community of practice, likewise, is something I don't think we've recognized too well as being part of an integrated staff development program. So, Yufei, I hope that helps.
Isn't one of the challenges the lack of continuity? You might bring a professor in, or you might bring an expert in, but they're there for a day, they're there for 2 days, and the expectation is that again you have that hypodermic needle approach to knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and it just doesn't take.
Right. Yeah. So, and I'm as guilty, or probably more guilty than anybody else in this um, kind of thing. We do have these one-off kind of courses and presentations, um, and most of the time, that they're more awareness building. The things I do, because they're more in terms of higher education or continuing education than training. They're more awareness building, but they're not really um, integrated into a larger, say, staff development program. So, and this is, I mentioned at the conclusion of my talk that these four keys all have to be integrated. They all have to work together, and that's what we need to start thinking about: is how can we put together an integrated program that enhances critical thinking, that builds competency, that gives managers a community of practice to work with, networking after the training and the continuing education occurs. And then the organization itself has to be willing and has to encourage a culture of learning. So it all has to be integrated. And a one-off, one-week presentation doesn't do that.
Well, very good. I guess I am struck most in this presentation by the idea of a community of practice.
Uh-huh.
Mostly because the people who I've seen talk about that before have just failed time and time again. I love the idea. I just absolutely love the idea. It makes sense on so many levels. And the question is, to what degree is it kind of this shallow, superficial
Yeah.
shell that means whatever the people who are managing the park say it is, and doesn't allow for one, evolution and transformation, and second, doesn't allow for outlier opinion.
Yeah.
The example that I would give is going back to Mexico and the monarch sanctuary. The monarchs, the symbol of North America. And so much has been said in the past 20, 25 years about the importance of the monarchs and the fragility of the species. And so much has been said about the value of tourism. Yet there's absolutely, negligible amounts of information in English about how to visit the area.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my 15-year-old article being one of the most up-to-date articles in English about the monarch sanctuary. How do we, again, how do we work together to promote responsible visitation in the area? How do we, using a different language, English in my case, participate in such a community? I see the idea, I don't see it in practice.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's going to take an organization that realizes that is an important dimension of its staff development, is to encourage that, to provide some time for staff. This is difficult because, as we all know, protected areas generally are very understaffed, but we don't have this, and we don't encourage dialogue debate, we're not going to be able to move effectively forward in the 21st century. The out of debate and out of dialogue often comes new ideas. So how do we get this translated? That's somebody at some point with using critical thinking is going to say, hey, you know what? Our visitors are English and our interpretive program is in Spanish. We need to figure out a way to reach them. And this problem is as true here in the U.S. as it is anywhere else. We're not any further ahead on this in terms of developing a community of practice.
Well, maybe the trouble or the question there is that we say community when it really is much more a collection of communities.
Yeah, well, that could be true too. Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, when we talk about, Mexico and the park, certainly there's no information in English. But, the same can be said in the US, to what degree do we have the information in French, in German, in Spanish? And again, kudos to the parks that do it. Grand Canyon, yes, you can read in Espanol or Francais.
Mm.
Um, but
But what about
what,
Japanese? Or just the other night on our television station, there was an item about the state of Montana wanting to attract visitors from China. Well, if we're going to do that, we have to have things published in Chinese. We'll have to have restaurants that offer Chinese food. Um,
or at least a menu in Chinese talking about the local cuisine.
right, yeah, something. Yes, we because they're not going to be with their group leader all the time. And then the interpretive brochures at Glacier National Park or Yellowstone would have to be in Chinese as well. It has to be more and more integrated. And that's probably one of the areas that we're failing very well. Maybe if we dive deeper to understand what's not happening and the causes of it is these individual silos that we all work with that are called organizations.
Hey, we have another question from UFA.
Okay.
And again, UFA, later on, we are going to drag you into a hangout. Uh, Steve? What do you think IUCN is doing well and not doing well in fostering the community of practice?
Well, in one sense, I think IUCN is trying to develop a community of practice. I think the meetings and WCPA, the World Commission on Protected Areas, and our individual um, uh, specialist groups like the tourism one are indeed communities of practice. So they may not use that particular terminology, but by getting people together, such as the World Parks Congress that's coming up, and UFA, I hope to see you there. Um, well, I know I will see you there because we're going to be at the launch event for the best practice guidelines. And I think those best practice guidelines are an example how UFA, who's one of the editors, pulled them together with UFA, 160 different authors or something like that. That in itself is a community of practice. So I think IUCN does that in a sense very well.
And what doesn't it do well?
Wow, you're making me walk out on thin ice here. I think I think sometimes IUCN probably takes a more conservative approach in terms to how it organizes things and more have a hierarchical kind of approach. So when indeed we need maybe more transparency, we need maybe more dialogue, and of course those things take time. And when you take time, that means more resources have to be devoted uh, to encouraging that dialogue.
I'll answer the question and I'll make my petition. I would love to see the IUCN people participate in Google Hangouts.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there seems to be a great expenditure in having meetings and going to different places, and that has its value. But I would certainly invite you folks and colleagues to join us on a Google Hangout and/or host your own conversations just like this.
Right. Have a discussion with some of the people in IUCN. Yes. Hmm.
Yesterday I was tweeting one of the words that's kind of coming up. And it's been around for years, but it's coming up again. Virtual tourism, and it's the use of the internet to
Right.
show where places are and how to travel. It can be as simple as a hotel concierge using his smartphone, saying,
Ah,
let me show you the room.
right. Right.
and
Yes.
and it can either, or it can be the person in a canoe with his Google Cam or whatever,
Mm.
broadcasting for people who are homebound.
Yes.
It can either replace tourism or it can abet and complement tourism.
Yeah.
But when we're seeing virtual tourism really take off, when we're seeing the Google Maps of the Great Barrier Reef or the Grand Canyon, uh,
Hmm.
I just think that the next 20 years are going to be so exciting in terms of showing what is available in parks, showing
Hmm.
certainly the problems and some of the causes for concern.
Yeah.
And if we can see some of these things online and then have the opportunity to visit,
Right.
I think that that combination is something that we're in a once in a generation opportunity to have.
Well, exactly right. Just think about the advancements in technology in the last 7 or 8 years. The development of smartphones and what they can do. Um, and we're only at the beginning of this. I think the technology, if anything, will increase the demand for visitation to protected areas. And are protected area managers ready for this? Will they have the technology there in their park or protected areas to support this? And when we look generationally, you and I, and particularly myself, we're not the strong generation on this communication technology. It's the people that are 20 and younger that are going to be using this. They're going to be using this in many different ways that we don't even think about now. So, are we going to be prepared for that technology? And recently in the United States, in wilderness, there's this debate. Well, should we allow cell phones in wilderness? And I'm not talking about putting cell phone towers in wilderness, just for those of you out there who might be concerned. But many wildernesses are within the range of cells, and so these many of the wilderness managers see cell phones as a threat to an experience, rather than as a way that can complement or enhance a person's experience. So it's going to take a different mindset as well when it comes to technology. And how can we build a better experience by using the technology rather than opposing it because it's going to come. So how do we work it is the important question, I think.
A brief shout out to Martin Fluker. I don't know if you've, Steve, I don't know if you've heard of
Yeah.
Fluker Post.
Yeah. Right.
Uh, but this gentleman in Victoria in Australia has created a whole system in which he puts posts up on the trails and protected areas and asks people to set their camera,
Hmm. Yeah.
phone on the post and take a picture of the trail. And in this way, he's created these time lapse uh, reviews of the park maintenance, of the trail maintenance.
Uh huh.
Uh, and again, there are things we can do in real time. There are things that we can do and
Exactly.
upload later. There are just so many options that we have. The question is being clever enough and figuring out,
Right.
what makes sense in terms
Yeah.
of conserving.
Right. Yeah. And again, that's where we need managers to think critically about this, to evaluate, to be aware of what's going on. Okay.
Okay. Well, Yufei extends his thanks. I'm going to
I'm
extend my thanks.
going to extend my thanks to everyone out there. So,
Steve, I really would like to thank you for doing this as a webinar. I hope you can do more. So many things to learn from you. Beautiful presentation.
yeah, we're having fun doing this. So, hope to do more.
Okay, stay online. We're going to stop the broadcast here. Thank you everybody for watching. Comments are welcome. I'll be updating the show notes with some of these links. And Steve, we'll see many of you there in Australia.
Okay, take care, everybody.